tree EIPS system actually reconciles itself well. The other aspects to add to it are obviously golden and brown. And the reason being for this is because most can resolve with white and brown, and we wouldn't want conflicts between white and ourselves. And we kind of understand that in the mixed race couples, you've got a white and a what they would call black parent, but we know that it reconciles better with brown. So even though they might be referenced at lots of different systems as black, we know that the unfairness seems to happen in the black system. And so if you actually looked at it from the brown system, a lot of stuff can be reconciled. But a mixed race couple of white and brown, so to speak, some people are still referencing the old system of black. I can't really take that on, I must admit, simply because of the amount of conflict I'd have to deal with if that they'd have to see it themselves. It's too much of a burden. That stuff goes sometimes way beyond C. And C is the limitation for me. I won't go beyond that system because it was created before me, it will still exist after me, and it's too long-winded. It was a need to maneuver straight into the new kingdom with a good set of rules to actually keep us in good stead forever and ever. So when we're looking at the money, that's brilliant. When we're looking at houses, it's brilliant. When we're looking at trees, it's brilliant. When we're looking at life in general, it's brilliant. And even unto CMG, Forever Life, and Big L, we know that the other facilitations of the EIPS system, inclusive of everything aforementioned, i.e. Rui Akintu, Herprian EIPS, Lupwa, and unto the Goldens, we have our Dahaprianism and Cleotoism. We know that the logical bypass agreement is necessary to show progression in our learning curves. I've had to do a lot of transgressionary work, a lot of system testing work with regards to things, and take a lot of beat down to actually realize things in their proper light. And when I realized the issues with regards to the Ten Commandments, I just understood that how this could be misused and inappropriate for most people's circumstance. So I created the St. Aquabubble stat system of alive good without blaspheme, betrayal, or lie. This one gives you at least stats from 0 to 100%, which you can compare with things to just see how you're doing in comparison relative to where you should be and where you actually are. And those corrections can actually happen along those lines. Logical bypass agreement just basically says that, we've become golden. All right, so with regards to the golden, no children, no house. No help really of any kind apart from mostly Dee and her, or my in-laws, her parents. And, still we had our issues with regards to parents, mum and dad, and children of category A. And so we have to say that, a logical bypass agreement saves you the whole issue of divorce. And if you divorce, it's still not a problem. But what it simply says is that, as it was in the beginning, it should be at the end. Well, when you look at Jesus and he says, essentially that, you can do it with someone else, like a couple in a relationship, but, it's better if you do it yourself. We could understand that. And so to some degree, you have to acknowledge the fact that all of these burdens placed on us relative to marriage and other people's insecurities, jealousies, envies, and what can I say, unscrupulousnesses. Sometimes we've been taking on the burden of these things without actually realizing, and that's not our burden. Our sole responsibility is to each other. But the each other aspect of it has its own demands, like God said, or Jehovah said, go forth and multiply, so to speak. So in that, we don't have children. We were coming up to improperness based on this, the begrudgings and the upsets and so on. But with the tree system, it doesn't matter. The tree is fluid of life. like water is fluid of life. The other facets of human creation and building are in these different compartmentalizations where people have had the wealth, and they'd had to have the ability to, not always accommodate people to do things, because people wouldn't do things. So if they asked somebody to do something and they wouldn't do it, they had no real reprimand. They couldn't progress. And so progression was more about under the thumb and more about enslavement and forcing people to do things. And so what we have to realize is that the minute that actually came to its end, they tried to reconcile and put the situation to at least sovereignty and free will. And so we understand them with profound respect, understand what they tried to accomplish with it, and realize that the rest of it, they knew they couldn't do it themselves. The individual's free choice had to take them there. But in the fact that the free choice was being usurped and circumvented by other people's opinions and wants and circumstances, it makes it very difficult. Some people are religious, some people are, what can we say, atheist. Some people are about magic and enchantment, and all of these things working along had their problems. So you had to compartmentalize out of it. And in compartmentalizing out of it, it was difficult to come up with institutions that would actually reconcile this well. One of the greatest institutions of all time we know is the church, but you also have temples. But whereas we've progressed in this specific timeline to appreciate these systems, you still had law, Lore. And when you had the law system was unto mostly Greek gods, but you also had the Romans and you also had others. But they created a convolution or a way around things. And the way around things was with the law actually becoming spelt L-A-W. And beyond the law of L-A-W, you also had people trying to get there with regards to the monetary system and money and wealth. And so they made their way to manipulate the word profit, originally spelled P-R-O-P-H-E-T, of different meaning and authority. And then they started to utilize it with a spelling of it, P-R-O-F-I-T. So you had to kind of understand that this is how they were reconciling. And when they got to the point of convolution, well, what could be resolved? You were just in the circumstance you were in, and so you had to go to another place to resolve said issues. But essentially, most people would reconcile or recognize that this position you went to was as God. And, the good thing about the Christian religion is that they understand this. And so they very much said, you ain't laying your hands on Jehovah ever. Every hedge is safe and sacred. We aren't going there. He set down a brilliant rule that gives you a good transition into the earth or onto the earth. And once you're there on the earth, you're on your own. He can't be burdened with you every day of his life. All of us feel that way. When we want to get somewhere, we don't want to be burdened. Was it always cleaning up the messes of others? And so they went forward to creating this spiritual writings. All right, so we had Bibles, places to learn, and people that would teach. And some of these people were born of man and woman, and some of these were simply angels or pop-ins, as an expression, and they popped in with the meaning and the literal sense of things to actually accommodate. But as people were still caught up in the rigmarole of selfishness and wanted to be very much their selves, all of these beings aforementioned run at very different levels and very different compartmentalizations. And so you had to see that the problems weren't on purpose. They didn't actually mean to cause people harm, but the systems that they run with are protective of each individual. So they might want to go outside and give a person £20, and they can go and give this person £20. But if their system is defending them, you understand the system might actually create two versions. And that's the problem we were having with the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It will create two systems. That person might go out and pay that person £20, and that person's all right having had £20, but their life isn't much improved. Whereas the other side of the system actually gets the short-handedness of it, because all that happens is to that person, you might think they're the same, or you might think they're different. It's difficult to reconcile or understand or comprehend that. But that person hears no instead, and they don't get help. They don't receive a £20 or anything, and they're still suffering and frustrated, thinking, how the heck is this not benefiting me? How can everybody tell me no? And what they had to know is that they had to find some source or access to religion so that they could actually reconcile what was needed to be reconciled unto to that spirituality or religion or academia. And in reconciling that, they had a way forward. One of the easiest systems that people are actually manipulating now that still has its problems with regards to that to and fro-edness of yes, no, is the best way to say it, is the academic scenario. If you go there trying to pass a test and you keep going to and fro and finding yourself losing, then who's winning? And so this was why you had to compartmentalize as best as you can. That's why, for want of better examples, you don't touch Haverhedge, you don't touch Jehovah, you don't get there. You also don't get to Olympus and mess with Zeus. You don't get to Asgarden to mess with Odin ever. And that's what it's had to be. But all of these, you can understand, have produced magnificent generations, even unto Buddha. You don't get to mess with Buddha. And so on. And some of them are so well hidden now that you just don't know what's going on if they ever pop into your reality. You just, what am I looking at here? Is this a person? So you understand how difficult the road has been to even get to the point of trees and EIPS. But the Paul Warren, Pike Allen, the Deborah Jean Bennett Allen, have had to use additional names and titles, just like the Bible's done to a certain degree, with the I Am, the God of Israel, the, the Lord, the God Almighty or Almighty God, and so on and so forth. You can understand Judaism has done similar. You can understand also that Islam is doing similar. But then we have additional systems like the Hindu system, which kind of throws us out of balance. That's more of a law, L-O-R-E system. It's very strange in its interpretation of things, and everybody runs with, what they can balance well. Then we have new systems like Reiki, Scientology. And so for a scenario with regards to trees, EIPS, we're looking at the golden and we're looking at the brown, actually facilitating and complementing for the most part. But we have to be reconciled to category A children, simply so that we can have lives back as man and woman. And we also have to be representative of logical bypass agreement, which puts us back to, regardless of all of this, marriage and pomposity, so to speak. We have to go back to being those single people, recognizing a different aspect. And I had to highlight that aspect is simply understanding the progression tree from single to relationship as boyfriend, girlfriend, or couple. And then you may go to marriage. But after you go to marriage, now you need more scope, more room to maneuver, but there is none. If you have the children, you've got the other additional responsibilities, and you're thinking that you're something you're not, because you're not category A at all. You're just a child having a child. Now, if you are, extremely flush and wealthy, you might think, no, I'm category A, aren't I? But you haven't got a system that benefits yourself and others. You've just got a system that benefits you and your family. So you need to do a bit more work on that. And that still gets you still to category B or category C or lower in the worst eventualities of things. But the situation I've had is so bad that I've had to say that, they might have kept me at D or E or even further down the ladder and never allowed me to progress to category A. That had to be a realization for myself. And then I had to understand, how am I going to be funded in this category if there's only myself and my wife? And even worse, how am I going to be accommodated in this category if there's only me? So the logical or bypass agreement simply says that, I can once again be me. I can be the Paul Warren Allen, realizing himself now as the Paul Warren Pike Allen. And my wife can be herself, realizing herself as Deborah Jean Bennett. Or she can reference herself as the Deborah Jean Bennett Allen. And still understand that she's okay. She doesn't have to commit anymore to marriage in that way because we've already done it. We're licensed as consistent, loyal to each other, which simply allows us to know that we're two dependable people, relatable to each other. Even if we had other partners or other relationships, or even went to concubinism, which I see as the next level, past actually being married, these people that we share relationships with would not be accountable to a system of adultery ever at all, neither ourselves, because we've actually understood the journey of life to this degree and simply said that yes, we've had to deal with immense suffering, and the ways that we've looked at things are maybe some things are really good and some things are really bad, and we've tried to omit the bad. And so we move on past logical bypass agreement to reconcile and understand that it's good to have maybe unanimous vote relative to offspring, meaning consummation of a relationship and children. Because if you really don't want those implications on your life, you don't want them simply because you see the complexity of it. If I have additional children, I've got to account for them. And also within the stipulation of actually having additional children, they're going to age too. Is it fair for me to actually have children and make them immortal based on all the suffering and experiences that other people are experiencing? So someone in my status of golden might not necessarily want children, not unless it's fortified by unanimous vote. And unanimous vote benefits me more to have more people in my enclave, so to speak, of concubinism, because we can't mess up that way. We sit down, and if it's to be, it's to be. And then maybe one person or a couple of people out there want to experience children, but you understand how that works too. Just imagine you have a child, and then as you've had this child comes into their 20s or, something like that. And then this child is forced to leave you because they now have to enter into the old kingdom's way of doing things, or the monopoly, so they can reconcile for themselves. I can understand some God systems would never do this. They would just have their children unto themselves, and they would just live their lives continuously that way. And I very much would actually like that. I'd like them always to progress and to be in a good way. But I can't get over the hurdle that it seems a bit vain. So I can understand that some people will, relative to gods and statuses of parent, might have these children and lose them for them to actually go and impart on the earth. And that might have been the experience that both me and Dee have had in different compartmentalizations. The fact that My parents might be flesh and blood now, and they might be able to reconcile with the history of ourselves. But with all this toing and froing, it's made for a very difficult experience and journey for myself. How can I really consider my mum and dad of category B, C, or whatever, to actually really be in alignment with the parent? I can't. I can only just see them as the physical embodiments of those that gave birth and consummated to my creation, and try and conclude that they have plausible and good significant outcomes. You know? So that's what it is. It's like when I'm looking at it from that perspective, I can only come to the understanding that Jesus was highlighting this with his Lord's Prayer of Our Father who art in heaven. That even unto all of us, you know, those ones that have actually had children are productively creating children for the higher version of themselves or the parents. And that leads us into the understanding of why Jesus would say, you may call on my name and I will say, I don't know you. Because unto him, you know, even that passage of, you know, I have, relative to all of those that you gave me, God, I have not lost one of them. So when I've had to look at what scales down to me, the diamond beneath, so to speak, I've had to understand that at least I've given them a good threshold and I haven't made God destitute. And above me, they might well, based on compartmentalizations, have made me destitute. But I've fought through it continuously all the way through not to let that happen. So now I have to reconcile that, you know, relative to my parents and those higher than themselves, I've had to move out of that compartmentalization because they've made no provisions for me. They've basically just done a job to point, managed to physically get me on the earth, but it's no different than a bird being born or a sheep being born. They're living their life, they know nothing about me. And they'd never create anything further to benefit me because they don't see a problem. Where they are, they're fine. So I have to conclude that in order to circumvent that, when a person gets to that realization, they build well. And they build as best as they possibly can to encompass the circumference around them. And so in this golden title, I can understand that I've done that. And that should I lose this body, which I can't tell whether it's mortal or immortal, I just can reconcile and see the aging process. So I am just saying that when I come back to the next understanding of this, the next understanding of this is me definitely coming through the EIPS system. And the EIPS system simply says that your Dahaprianism kicks in. And, you know, for my wife, her Cleotoism kicks in. And she has the things that she wants, facilitations. We still have correspondence to each other and we're okay, but we have no children. Other people with children might be doing it a different way, which means that they're no longer here with their kids. They left their kids a long time ago, but they're enjoying paradise. And the actual physical asset that's left here is temporary. It's going to come to its demise at some point, but different alignments come through their parenting to act as parents, knowing knowing them as mum and dad, and they facilitate to the children as mum and dad. And so the children are always understanding that they've got parents there that can help them. But in my scenario, I don't have that. They're so limited, our resources being spread so thin that we just don't have that. And so I have to build again and build this so that the circumference of it even protects them. And so now we just don't have to worry. We don't have to burden the parent above that's already created their perfection, and we haven't noticed that there is a, what do you call it, a mutation that occurs, regardless of how perfect you've wanted it. And you have to really reconcile your tree back together with God. And those that don't do it, well, they're a burden. But you just do it for them, just so that you don't have any more stress on your head. But it's better if they are good, simply because they're not taking advantage of other people. And these other systems that we fall prey to can't take advantage of us or them. So that was logical bypass agreement. That was unanimous vote relative to offspring and children. The life, eternal life, I figured that, it might be good to experience the 19-year to 26.5 aspect, finding the best experiences within those age ranges and the youthfulness within those age ranges, so that we can be balanced out well as man and or woman. And this basically says that, it's cool. Doesn't matter whether I've got trillions of pounds. Doesn't matter whether I've got concubines around me. It basically always leaves me with something I can be doing, even if it's as simple as fishing or jet skiing or traveling. There'll always be resource there. But because I looked at it based on the world I'd experienced and those things that were always fleeting to me, I had to understand that I would build well enough so that there would at least be a commercial facet there. And Big L seems to be that, a nice roof garden scenario of business that basically doesn't work on the profit system at all. It just subsidizes and compromises to create opportunities for people. And so if you're working, you might be a 2 to 3 day week, but you still get a weekly wage. Jesus said something similar. If people are working and they turn up half the day, they get the same day's wages. Now that didn't seem entirely fair to me, but I kind of understand what he was getting at. The simple fact that these people can have a 3-day working week for me is my realization of Jesus's principle in a different way. And it's just saying, 3 day and you still get the week. It just means that if you do have kids in a house, then you're probably more subject to mortality than I am. And that mortality aspect of it still gives you a brilliant life with your kids. You'll have to reconcile the other things unto yourself as you progress past it. You've just got some protections, a lot of protections, I might add, of the tree EIPS. And that actually is accommodating you in a good way simply because you can be classified as brown. The golden aspect of us takes us much higher than that because of the principled philosophy that benefits ourselves and others. And so when I'm saying that the tree EIPS is one thing and I'm saying that the big L is another thing, then we have to look closely at LUPA, which is learning, leisure, entertainment, excursions, or experience excursions, one of the two. But then we've got, or both, but we've got also worthiness. We've got parks and playgrounds, parties, clubbing, and we've got wealth, and we've got adventure. In these things, the age appropriateness, whether age of consent above 19 plus, or we've got age of low, are all catered for. And there's always good activities for children to do and stuff like that. And the quota of everything is still okay and of merit relative to the monopoly system, their trading systems, and the skill base of people out there in the world that can benefit us. We always know that even unto the stories of the Bible and the Temple of the Ark of the Covenant, that God always creates these people that are multi-skilled and talented, way above what we are, to be able to do tasks beyond what we are capable of. So, now we go to look at we looked at Lupa, we look at Herprian EIPS. Herpry and EIPS is the system that essentially says if you fall on your face, we can pick you up and dust you off and give you some opportunity, but we can't do it all. We just have a system there that can do a lot of it, enough of it to count, but we don't place the burden of all of it on our shoulders because there's a world populated with billions of people and a lot of them is ascending to similar statuses as golden. And so I have to just suggest that, we have to offshoot some of that burden. But the principle of big offices is it gives people a sense of self back, and so they're all right. But they don't have to do it low level. They don't have to do a homeless shelter. They don't have to do, feeding people after midnight and stuff like that. It's already been done. The kingdom or new kingdom is not really supposed to have those things in it. So if someone does fall over and you get to see them relative to the monopoly system, then you just have something that you can pick them up. Yesterday, for example, they really tried to push the joke out for me. How many people did I see actually at the roadside that were going to be washing car windows and stuff like that? Trying to facilitate for themselves onto the Herpry and EIPS system, maybe looking for someone to give them £2,000 a night in a hotel, and to tell them to turn up at big offices on a Monday so that they can do this. How many people actually went there and just actually tried to do that? And were they of man and woman, or just created? Because I said those words, you've got to look at it. They were just created, but you would never know it. They actually have lived all of their life within your timeline. Just a joke on me, really. You get what I'm saying? Just to say your system doesn't work. Right? So that person just pops in on the street doing whatever. But why should they pop in? Why is it easy to put somebody in a destitute situation and not in a positive, plausible one to be able to help myself? Why make that one? Why not make the one that's actually going to turn around and facilitate me all that cash and give me a better life? So the Herpry and EIPS system is for them, and the gifts attributed to the Herpry and EIPS system are akin to the church as well. The church's system is not Herpry and EIPS. The church's version of it is called Rui Akintu. And the Rui Akintu means that, yes, if you walked into a church and you were destitute, they might be able to go some way, even maybe to shift you to the big offices and say, okay, cool, there's a resource to use. But for themselves, they've got plentiful resource and they'll always be okay because of the infinite neutral source bank, which flows through everything like the water and the trees of nature. And it simply just says, okay, cool, you need something, something's just appeared. You might get the question of calling someone and saying, look, thank you very much for donating £1 million to me. But that person is of God, of these higher systems. They just know that it got done, and you might call them up and they don't know anything that you're talking about. Just say, thank you. Yeah, good for you. Who knows how that system works? So that's what we're talking about relative to the Herpry and EIPS system. Reward for effort regardless of achievement basically is the fact that someone you notice is actually putting in the effort. You can actually send them to the big offices if you see fit and not burden yourself with it. And then they'll go to the big offices and do it. But you won't see that opportunity unless it's akin to Agribubble, stat system, 0 to 100%, closer to 100% of good, and philosophy that helps yourself and or others. Shows you've really worked that selfless suffering system to understand it well enough to see that person in a problem and try and assist them. Because I'm not having big offices, overburdened with stuff. And that's the same way that the social services system would look at it. And I must admit, the social service system hasn't benefited me really at all. It's benefited landlords, rewarded for their selflessness, they'd call it. But not myself. So, you think about it. I turn around and I need a place over my head. I've got nothing, but I've still got all my relative documentation. I go to them, I say, can you do this for me? They say, find a place first of all. So I have to find a place. It's never going to be the best place, is it? Just to keep me working, right? I'm motivated. So it's never the best place. It's some crappy one-room facilitation with its own cooking facilities, just some burnt-out oven. I've still got to work out how I'm going to heat the place in the wintertime. And so they turn around and between two payments, right, one for myself to survive on and one for the landlord. Check this joke out. Landlord can get what they ask for, so they know that the government will only pay them maybe up to £300, £400, £500, £600. In my case, I think it was £500 at the time. So they'll pay the landlord for this room. He's got a whole house. All of these accommodations and rooms disgusting to a degree. I've got to live in there. I don't know whether these are people born of man or just facets in the place, but I'm living in squalor. They're in squalor. And compared to the landlord's £500 a month, I get £68 a week. You ever tried to survive on £68 a week? Now, there'll be people walking the street, and some people will have the audacity probably to turn around and say, yeah, well, there's people worse off than yourself. You understand? So that person is worse because they don't have a roof over their head and they're walking the street and probably have to find some way, maybe using an old address, so they can pick up their security check, so they can have money. So they might be walking around with thousands of pounds in their pockets, but never really have a life ever. Does that sound fair to you? So, you know, me, I had to live on £68 a week. £68 could do nothing. Half of it had to go to heating the place and electricity. And the rest of it simply had to buy me a loaf of bread or some fruit. And all of that had to last me 2 weeks. It was 100 and something pounds every 2 weeks. That's what I got. So that's what I got, £500 and that. And then I went out, pushed myself all through work. And if I had not actually just kept forcing myself into experiences, I wouldn't know any of this. I'd just be some person probably dying in a one-bedroom apartment without any partnership or any friends or family or loved ones around me, right? So that's where they still kept on pushing me to, even now at 54. So when I say the tree EIPS system is a revolutionary event, I need it to manifest. So the golden brown tree EIPS system is to be acknowledged and implemented. And if not in this world, then in my next world, definitely. But in this world, you're going to have to pick me up with that change. So whoever's out there parenting, just understand that my God's going to be watching for the opportunity to take over everything that you have and bequeath to me at least some blessings so I can have a life. If you can't, get off your fucking ass, so to speak. Work it out and fix some things for me. And I'm not talking about my mum and dad. Category B people that are best children, that don't have the resources for such. I'm talking about you that do. £1 of your money is worth like billions to trillions to me. And you're still that fucking miserly. That explains Rui Akintu, and it also explains Herpri and EIPS. So we've gone Herpri and EIPS and Rui Akintu both have a system where you could just pick someone up, give them some money, turn them over to big offices, and they can assess them to see whether or not they can find a job, and they can just create a job. That's actually stupid. Our whole employment and educational facet is. You know, when you fall over, you know, you're not really going to be thinking about whether or not you can actually hold down a job or whether or not you can earn money. So most people would say, well, just die then, you know. And they don't even have a philosophy. They've got nothing that they've experienced that can pick them up. You get my point? So when Big Offices is there and when Big Offices is running, whichever branch or facet you're at, you're supposed to say, okay, they say, look, we've reached threshold capacity. We've got maybe 100 people working for us. We've got a couple of businesses working on projects. We're definitely making sure that the local area Big L establishment is all right, facilitating people. We might have people running tour guide stuff. Essentially, it's aimed at coffee drinkers. And essentially, it carries the facilitation to outsource. So it would be a question of, if you go there, you can have a good time there. You can order some food in there, sit down and enjoy the environment. Roof garden-esque, definitely plush, definitely looking at the gold and the diamonds, not looking at the low, draggled part of life that I've experienced. We're looking at way beyond that, because I don't need any more pop-ins of poor people. You know, I don't know whether you were being funny or you just couldn't keep track of that stuff. But, you know, when a parent turns up, they just say, okay, cool. We're here and our children are going on that trip this afternoon and we're just seeing them off, and then afterwards, after we've had our coffee and stuff, we're just going to go on the town and just have a day out for ourselves, you know? And so they get to do that. And other people, they might turn up and do what they do, and one Big L will cater this way and another Big L will cater that way. And so the one thing that I remember through the summers of old was Shelburne School. And I remember, turning up there, I never had any money. So I have to look at, sometimes these commercial aspects disappear. It's quite simply because you can't fund them. And, you know, I would have loved to have walked to Shelburne School when I was sent down there and have, you know, the money in my hand to just contribute, pay my weekly subscription and turn up there when I want to, or just, you know, buy a couple of events and, you know, just turn up there. You know, I might look down the prospectus and say, I don't want to do candlestick making. But I do want to turn up when the buses go into the adventure playground. And so Big Offices would do stuff like that, but not just for children, for adults. You know, the child might turn around and go down and go on their trip, and that's fine. But then they say to the adult, okay, cool. We've got a facilitation relative to the summer, and we've had a nice, good donation from a millionaire, and there's a millionaire villa that some of these people are going to in the summer. And I say, but how much does that cost? They go, well, how many children? The person says, well, I've got 5 children. You know, I can't afford to. He goes, it's heavily subsidised. They go, well, how much is it subsidised? You say, well, £500. He says, 500, I can't even afford 500. I goes, come on, £500 for 5 kids. Oi, Jack, you've got one child, haven't you? He goes, yeah, I've got one child. He goes, how much are you paying for that child to go on this trip in the villa? He goes, £500. Yeah, that will highlight whether you're miserly or not. Get my point? But Jack's not worried. Jack, if his job ever falls over, he's got one with us. So we're not really worrying about the way you look at things. It's idiocy from our perspective and imbecilic. But you thought you needed to challenge people, so you created more and more challenges. And it's difficult trying to work through these challenges. And so we've got Rira, which can do that. We've got Tanuka, which is that person that turns around and goes out there. And we might notice them like, I don't know, maybe we're ordering food from a local takeout establishment. And the local takeout establishment, he just serves us so well for so long. Customers turn up and they say, you know what, I'll just take something, I'll order from this person. And they do, you know. And so that person's all right, but they're not realizing the monopoly system doesn't hold anything up. It just destroys you. So they lose everything. And then we're just like, where'd you go? He goes, well, I've got my last day. We're closing up soon. So we just say, okay, cool. You've been on our books for a long time now. So we're going to offer you this opportunity. What we want you to do is fill out this application form for the Infinite Neutral Source Bank. And we need you to just bring across a few statements or whatever, as much as you can, relative to your ingoings and outgoings. And we'll sort it out for you. And we just look at it, loans he's got coming in, he's got loans going out, he's got paid. We turn it all around. Every single payment that he has had to go out, even onto loans, and pay them himself, even onto the debts that he's in, we turn it all around to create all of the positive flow of money back into his bank account in the infinite neutral source bank. And then he realizes, that, I don't know, £700,000 or whatever that he's lost, plus the debts is turnaroundable. We turn around and we just say, okay, there's your money. Now, don't make the same mistake again. If you need a job, come to us. As long as we're at quota, we're not taking anybody in. That's probably a good eye of a needle safeguard. But when we've got room within that threshold, we will. And so we'll open up more and more big offices and more big L's, but we won't corner the market on it. We'll cap it at some point that's reasonable to give other people room to maneuver and to thrive. But we don't run on profit loss. We run on infinitism. We don't care why we're paying you a wage. We just cap it, but so it fits into normal parameters or as close to normal as possible. But one of the things that our staff will actually have that might be over other people is that they might be with their partner and their partner turns around and says, I don't understand this. Is that really how much you get paid? He goes, yeah, I do. He goes, well, I don't get it. You work 3 days a week and I get that for working 5. Get my point? We don't care. We picked him up so that, he or she will be able to save face when you have kids together. You're not bothered about the joke that you're making. So you're in that competitive system you are. You might decide, can I go and work for Herper and EIPS? And it might not be plausible or possible for you because you're not what they are. He is or she is. So they get the job and they get whatever and they get to help you out. And it might even get to the point where you don't have to work anymore, even though you're a child of the monopoly system. Because he covers most of it. He's all right still on 3 days. But that's the kind of world that I'm looking at. That shows you with merit why you reconcile with God, with the tree. And if you do that, you're all right with me. We just see that your agri-bubble stats are all right. And that's it. You won't have problems with regards to logical bypass agreement. The minute you can have that conversation with your partner, you're not letting us down. All right, so we've got the life, eternal life as well, the unanimous vote. We've got Rera Tanuka, Infinite Neutral Bank is always going to be sponsoring the big offices, so we're all right with money. And, depending on our threshold, we might actually be able to offer people space. And so you can understand that there might be some gamers out there or some leisurely people out there that simply say, we wanted to open up this that would be in the public's interest and stuff like that. And we could just say, okay, cool, that's all right. But I know you want the investment for yours, but we already know how this works. There's very little chance of you making any profit there at all. There's only the facilitation of you actually having a business out there that benefits the public. So if you're okay accepting a wage, we can make it decent enough for you. But relative to the actual overheads and all of that stuff, even though we're putting it in your best interest, we'll supply the money for you to actually be able to do that. Just don't try to put it in a situation where you're ripping yourself off or ripping us off and trying to turn it into a monopoly system. It's not that. Take your wage and be happy with it. If you need a little bit more, don't worry about us or worry about that, because the things we've got in resource will be huge. So even unto properties and stuff like that and a place to live, you should be okay with us. But like I said, when we reach threshold, we reach threshold. We're not going there no more. That's why each big office is of much value. because they can cater to a certain degree of people and keep that flow going. And that's why God will always love us, because he will just see, they're all right. Look at them, they're looking after these people. And how's that work in our world? Well, that's what God does with Selfridges. He does with this place and that place. Even unto Transport for London, even though I don't feel it. London Transport for London seems to always be trying to take the piss. So hopefully when I go in there this weekend, it's not that. So when we're looking at the fact of me going there and subordinating myself, I'm onto the facet of Jesus, which is washing the feet of the 12 apostles. And when he washes the feet of the 12 apostles, it's because they asked him, which of us is the greatest? And he said, the one that actually is a servant to the others is the greatest. So as he's washing their feet, hopefully they understood that he is the greatest. Because none of you would have thought to do that, let alone to teach a lesson. All right, so when they see me at work and they see me as an underling or, a person of not real significance at all, I just do the job that I'm supposed to be doing, right? Regardless, I've been through all of these hardships, right? £68 a week, not funny. Working 2 days while still facilitating all of this joke going on in my mind. Still representative of a category A parent to some degree without any resource. Or mum and dad. This is burdens placed on me by other people's reasonings, when really I'm just a category A child. But you can see I am like Jesus in the sense that I am a ruler of a universe when I moved up to category A with provisions to be that parent. But I just don't want to do the role. So I know that the systems that I've created within that facet really do put all of these things, even onto big offices and infinite neutral source, in their proper categorizations. It means that if I turn around and go there one day just to set up the initial office and the next one, I just don't really need to pay too much attention to it. It runs itself. All I just do is turn up on occasion, look, and just say, all right, how you doing, stuff? It seems that you're okay with the situation of money and stuff. Yeah, it's okay. You do realize how much you get by comparative standards to other people out there? Yes. We get 5-day week money, even though we work 3 days. Now, there might be other people that are doing other things out there in the world. You know, one thing that's really been a hate to me to some degree, when I've gone on holiday and I've seen these black-skinned vendors, right? And I'm not saying I hate them. I'm not saying that I don't like what they're doing or don't respect it. I'm just saying, for this person out there in the sun 8 days, they're not really going to get much money, not even off me. What are you selling? You get my point? So I get it that they're there for show. You get my point? So I wouldn't mind if they were getting a decent wage for what they do. I mind that they're not getting a decent wage for what they do. And what they should be out there in the sunlight is maybe 2 hours a day, if that. They don't even have to work past 2 days maybe. But their money's decent enough to maybe even coincide with my part-time wage at the moment. So they don't have to worry about life. You get my point? And the other things relative to big offices and stuff like that is just about opportunity, is so that they can actually still be facilitated in some way to go out and do things. But I just don't want to be facilitating uselessness is the best way to look at it. And that's just the fact that the facilitations of Shelburne benefited some people, right? And if we move on to Sobel, it benefits some people, but it doesn't benefit others. Do you get what I'm saying? Some people say, but aren't you being discriminatory, What if these vendors actually want to go out and experience being in a multi-million-pound villa? I'd say, well, you have to understand that you, through your efforts, had to make those contributions towards such. And I'm sorry, but a vendor title is not going to be enough. And they might say, oh, but it's my circumstances. Well, I've got this thing. If the threshold isn't met, a big office, go there and do another job. You got it now. It's a reward for effort, regardless of achievement that this is. And it at least, it takes off of your head the burden of academia. Just go out there and do the job. Now, what might the job be? Just imagine a public park turns around and says, oh my goodness, I've got staff working here and we're just on the monopoly system, so, I've got enough staff just about to be able to cover it. We'll say, well, if we sent you another additional member of staff or a couple and we're paying them our own selves, we'd have to say, well, there's a non-disclosure on this payment so that you don't interrupt with their affairs. But you turn up and you help them, we'll give you a wage for it. Is that right? So then we sign off with them to be able to do that, but we pay them. Now, they're never going to interrupt, the council's not going to turn around because their system is that fickle, right? Now we've sent 2 staff along, they've turned around and said, how can we cut our budget? Let's cut some of those staff. So those that had jobs with the council, now they've seen our staff turn up, they think we're going to pay for it all. So you understand the irony of what this is. So this is what I need fixed on high, all around, inside and out, so that I can actually have a good experience within this for a change. Yeah, I might not turn up at the big offices too much to manage stuff, but there should be people plausible there because of the whole build of golden, brown trees, EIPS. And when I'm doing what I'm doing. And when I go to there, they might just suddenly see me as this 54-year-old responsible individual, asking them about how they're doing and this and that. And I've got to try and not be too generous, turning there, walking around and going, oh, so how you doing? You getting married? All right, cool. That's fine. And then buying them a house. I did think about stuff like that, but it's not on, is it? If I can't do it in the small things, I can't do it in the big things. So I can't do that, essentially, in the small thing of buying someone a house and think I can't buy everyone else one. And that's just ridiculous. So, when it is relative to Herprian EIPS and to the big office system, you can understand that what we more often would do is simply like Circle 33 did back in the day, and just make sure all these properties are actually purchased and bought, so that if we need to allocate them on occasion to people, they actually have them. But they've got essentially enough money in their pocket to be able to buy one. And they might turn around to me and say, oh, but we did that for you, didn't we, Mr. Allen? No, you didn't. What you did was give me a system that was going to turn me into a god so that I could take a lot of the burden off your back. Then you gave me no resources to facilitate such. Thank you. And so it seems very much that the tree EIPS system actually reconciles itself well.